What if the most powerful words ever spoken to the human heart are the very words you have heard so many times that you no longer truly hear them at all? 2,000 years ago, a carpenter's son from Galilee spoke words so simple a child could repeat them, yet so profound that empires, philosophers, and ordinary hearts have wrestled with them ever since. We stand today at the edge of those ancient words, listening not as historians, but as people who still ache with the same fears, angers, and longings he addressed. What follows is a journey through 10 sayings that were never meant only to be heard, but to be lived. He did not simply teach people what to believe. He taught them how to live, how to think, how to forgive, and how to see the world and one another with new eyes. And here is the strange thing. These words have been printed on walls, embroidered on pillows, quoted at weddings and funerals, repeated so often that they have almost become background noise. We nod along, we move on. But somewhere beneath the familiarity, each of these sayings still carries a quiet fire, waiting for someone to stop long enough to feel its heat again. So let me ask you something. What if just 10 sayings of Jesus only 10 could completely change the way you see yourself, the way you see other people, the way you understand suffering, forgiveness, and even the reason you are alive? And what if the very last saying in this journey turns out to be the one you most need to hear, the one that has been waiting for you all along? If you are drawn to the hidden teachings of Jesus, to ancient Christianity, to the mysteries of Scripture, and to the deeper meaning behind the words attributed to Christ, take a moment to subscribe to this channel. In this video, we will go beyond the familiar stories to examine 10 of the most challenging and demanding sayings of Jesus, exploring how they still transform lives today, and separating what endures from later interpretations and speculation. Because here is what so many people miss. The teachings of Jesus were almost always simple on the surface, plain enough for a fisherman or a farmer to understand. Yet underneath that simplicity lay something enormous, something that quietly asks everything of the person who dares to take it seriously. These were not gentle suggestions. They were invitations that turned lives upside down. Think about what these words actually call us to do. They ask us to forgive when every instinct screams for revenge, to love beyond the safe borders of our comfort, to stop judging the people around us and turn that hard gaze inward instead, to trust in something greater than ourselves when life falls apart and no answers come, to examine our own hearts before we point at anyone else's, to serve others rather than dominate them, to seek what is true rather than what merely looks impressive, and to value the things of the Spirit above the things we can hold, count, or buy. Read that way. These are not comfortable words at all. They are demanding. They press against the way most of us naturally want to live, and that is exactly where their power lies, because the real force of Jesus' teachings was never simply in understanding what he said. Anyone can understand the words. Children memorize them. Scholars analyze them. The true power is discovered only when you begin to ask what those words demand from you, the one who hears them, right now in this ordinary moment of your ordinary life. Knowledge changes nothing on its own. Only the willingness to be changed does. That is the journey we are about to take together. Not a distant lecture about history, but a slow, honest walk through 10 sayings that have outlived every civilization that tried to ignore them. 10 sayings that still know how to find the tender, unhealed places in the human heart. And there is a reason we begin where we do. Because the first of these teachings does not ease us in gently. It confronts us immediately with the hardest thing Jesus ever asked of anyone. So let us begin where Jesus himself began to overturn everything people thought they knew about love. Love your enemies. 3 words spoken on a hillside in Galilee, to a crowd who had every reason to hate. They lived under occupation. They knew the sting of injustice, the faces of the men who taxed them, arrested them, humiliated them. And into that raw, familiar anger, Jesus said something no one expected. Not love your neighbor, not love your family, love your enemies. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. Think about how radical that truly is. There is nothing remarkable about loving the people who love you back. Even the cruelest heart can manage that. We are wired to protect what protects us, to cherish what cherishes us in return. That kind of love costs almost nothing. But Jesus pushed further than comfort allows. He asked his followers to take the very people who had wounded them and refuse to let hatred have the final word. Why is this so difficult? Because loving an enemy feels like betraying our own pain. It feels like pretending the wound never happened. But here is where we must be careful, because Jesus never confused love with approval. To love an enemy is not to say that what they did was acceptable. It is not to excuse cruelty or to call injustice good. Love and approval are not the same thing. You can refuse to hate someone without ever pretending they were right. You can wish for their humanity to be restored without inviting their harm back into your life. And there is a quiet mercy hidden inside this command. Hatred, when we hold it long enough, does not punish the person who hurt us. It punishes us. It follows us into our sleep. It hardens something in our chest. Forgiveness is the only thing strong enough to break that cycle, to stop the poison from passing from one wounded heart into another. When you refuse to return hatred for hatred, you interrupt a chain that could have gone on for generations. That is why this teaching still finds us today, thousands of years later, in a world still full of grudges and retaliation, because the truth beneath it never expires. You cannot always control what someone does to you, but you can choose what their actions turn you into. Their cruelty does not have to become your character. Their darkness does not have to become your inheritance. And yet, before we can even begin to love the ones who wrong us, Jesus turns the mirror back toward ourselves with a second saying, just as unsettling as the first. "Judge not," he said, "and you will not be judged." For centuries these words have been quoted, sometimes wisely, sometimes carelessly. So let us be clear about what they do not mean. Jesus was not asking us to abandon all discernment, to lose the ability to tell right from wrong, to stop caring about truth. He was confronting something far more dangerous and far more common, the quiet arrogance of the human heart, our endless appetite for other people's failures. Have you noticed how naturally we do this? How quickly we can name the flaws of a stranger, a coworker, a family member, while remaining strangely blind to our own. Jesus gave this a picture no one who heard it could forget. "Why," he asked, "do you stare at the speck of dust in your brother's eye, while ignoring the plank in your own?" It is almost absurd when you imagine it a man squinting to point out a splinter, while a beam of wood juts from his own face. And yet that is us, again and again. We become experts on everyone's shortcomings but our own. The danger is not that we notice wrongdoing. The danger is that we use other people's darkness to avoid facing our own. Judgment becomes a way of feeling clean without ever being cleansed. But something changes when humility enters the room. When we begin with our own failures instead of everyone else's, our relationships soften. We become gentler, slower to condemn, quicker to understand. We stop measuring people by a standard we could never meet ourselves. So here is the takeaway to carry with you. Before you judge another person's darkness, have the courage to examine your own. It is a harder task than criticism ever was. But if we are honest about our own faults, we soon face an even harder question. How many times are we willing to forgive? Peter once thought he understood generosity. He came to Jesus with what felt like a bold offer, asking whether forgiving someone 7 times was enough. 7 felt patient, 7 felt merciful. But Jesus answered with words that shattered the arithmetic entirely. "Not 7 times," he said, "but 70 times 7. And in that moment, the whole idea of keeping count collapsed. Because that is the secret hidden inside those strange words. Jesus was not handing us a number to reach. He was not asking us to keep a ledger, marking each offense until we finally earned the right to walk away. He was doing the opposite. He was telling us to stop counting altogether. Forgiveness, in his teaching, is not a quota we fill. It is a way of living that refuses to keep score. And if we are honest, keeping score is exhausting. Resentment feels like power, but it is a slow poison. We imagine that holding a grudge punishes the person who hurt us, yet they often sleep soundly while we lie awake replaying the wound. Bitterness does not wound the one who caused the pain. It consumes the one who carries it. The person we refuse to forgive may have moved on years ago, while we remain chained to a moment that will not release us. But let us be clear about what forgiveness is and what it is not. Forgiveness is not the same as forgetting. It does not erase the memory, and it does not pretend the harm never happened. You can forgive someone and still remember clearly what they did. In fact, real forgiveness begins with honesty, not denial. And forgiveness does not always mean returning to a relationship that continues to harm you. You can release someone from your anger without inviting them back into your life. Letting go is not weakness. It is the doorway to freedom. So here is the takeaway to hold on to. Forgiveness is not always about saying that what happened was acceptable. Sometimes it is simply about refusing to let the past control your future. It is the choice to unclench your hands, to set down the weight you were never meant to carry forever, and to walk forward without dragging the wound behind you. And once our hearts begin to soften toward those who have wronged us, Jesus turns our gaze outward, toward everyone else. He offers a principle so simple that children can understand it, yet so demanding that entire lifetimes are spent learning to live it. Treat others the way you wish to be treated. We call it the Golden Rule, and we say it so easily that we forget how radical it truly is. Think about what it would actually mean to live this way. In your family, it would mean offering the patience you hope to receive on your worst days. In marriage, it would mean listening the way you long to be heard. In friendship, it would mean showing up the way you wish others would show up for you. At work, it would mean treating a colleague's effort with the respect you crave for your own. Even online, on social media, where it is so easy to reduce a stranger to a name and a careless comment, it would mean pausing to remember there is a real person on the other side of the screen. And it stretches further still, to strangers we will never meet again, and hardest of all, to the people who disagree with us, who irritate us, who see the world in ways we cannot understand. Do unto them, Jesus says, not because they have earned it, not because they will return the kindness, but because they too are human. So let me ask you something. What would change in your life if you treated every single person you encountered as someone whose feelings mattered? Not as an obstacle in your path, not as an inconvenience, not as a means to an end, but as a soul carrying burdens you cannot see. How many arguments would soften? How many wounds would never be inflicted? How much gentler would your days become? Here is the takeaway. Compassion begins the moment we stop seeing other people as obstacles and start seeing them as human beings. That single shift changes everything. Yet Jesus was not content merely to refine our behavior, to smooth the edges of how we treat one another. Again and again he reached deeper. He turned the world's logic completely upside down and pressed his words straight into the human heart. Consider for a moment what kind of teacher Jesus truly was. He did not come simply to make people comfortable in their assumptions, to pat them on the back and send them on their way unchanged. No. Again and again he took the world's familiar logic and turned it completely on its head. The proud expected greatness, yet he said, the humble would be lifted high. The powerful assumed they would always be first, yet he promised that the last would come first. He blessed the poor in spirit, comforted those who mourned, and declared that the merciful would themselves receive mercy. And in a world obsessed with domination, He insisted that true greatness is found not in being served, but in serving others. These were not gentle suggestions. They were quiet revolutions. And so, as we move into the next teachings, we leave the surface behind and descend into the deeper places of the human heart. Consider his fifth saying, "Do not worry about tomorrow." How strange those words sound to us, who live so much of our lives in a future that has not yet arrived. We imagine disasters that may never come. We rehearse conversations that will never happen. We lie awake at night, carrying the weight of 1,000 tomorrows. But Jesus invited his followers to live in the present, to trust that today has enough of its own concerns. Now, this is not a call to carelessness. There is a difference between preparation and anxiety. Preparation plants seeds and trusts the harvest. Anxiety only tears at the soul while nothing grows. Faith reshapes our entire relationship with uncertainty, teaching us that we do not have to control the future in order to face it with peace. And here is the takeaway. You can prepare for tomorrow without sacrificing the peace of today. Then comes his sixth saying, and it may be one of the most empowering words ever spoken. You are the light of the world. Think of everything light can mean. It is truth that pierces confusion. It is goodness that warms a cold room. It is hope when the night feels endless, courage when fear whispers, compassion when someone is breaking, and the quiet weight of moral responsibility to shine even when it would be easier to hide. But notice what Jesus did not say. He did not tell his followers merely to admire the light, to stand at a distance and praise it. He challenged them to become a source of light themselves. And here is the beautiful truth we so often forget. A small act of kindness never stays small. A single word of encouragement can carry someone through a day they were barely surviving. One gesture of grace can ripple outward through lives you will never meet. So the takeaway is this: your influence may be far greater than you think. And his seventh saying reaches into the very core of who we are. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. On the surface, it sounds like a lesson about money. But Jesus was asking something far deeper. What do you truly value? Is it status? The constant hunger to be seen as important? Is it fame? Or the many possessions we accumulate, hoping they will finally make us whole? Or is it the relationships we too often neglect? The time we cannot get back, the spiritual purpose we keep promising to pursue someday? Here is a question worth sitting with. If someone watched how you spent your time, your money, your attention, and your energy, what would they conclude you truly value? Not what you say matters, but what your life actually reveals. Because the takeaway is quietly piercing. What you repeatedly invest your life in eventually reveals what your heart considers most important. And so we arrive at the three sayings that cut deepest of all. Words that speak not to the crowd, but to the weary soul standing alone. These are the moments when polished words fall away, and something more honest remains. Perhaps you have known such a night, when the weight you carried felt heavier than your strength, when the noise of the world faded, and you were left with only your own tired heart. It is precisely there, in that quiet exhaustion, that the next words of Jesus were meant to be heard most deeply of all. Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, Jesus said, and I will give you rest. Notice who these words were spoken to. Not the strong, not the confident, not those who had everything figured out. They were spoken to the tired, the failing, the ones who had run out of answers. And perhaps that is why they still find us in our most private moments. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that sleep cannot fix. It comes from carrying grief no one sees, from failing at something you poured your heart into, from feeling utterly alone in a room full of people. It comes from fear that whispers in the dark, and from a spiritual confusion that leaves you wondering whether anyone is listening at all. To that person, Jesus does not offer a lecture. He offers an invitation. Come, lay it down. You were never meant to carry all of this by yourself. Perhaps these words matter most, not when everything is going well, But when you have reached the moment where you no longer know how to carry the weight alone, that is when the invitation stops being a comforting phrase and becomes a lifeline. And from that place of rest, Jesus gives a command that reshapes everything. Love one another, he said, as I have loved you. This is not love as a feeling that comes and goes with the weather of our moods. This is love as an action, a decision, a way of living. It looks like sacrifice, choosing someone else's need over your own comfort. It looks like compassion that steps toward pain instead of away from it. It looks like patience when patience is hard, service when no one is watching, humility when pride would be easier, and selflessness in a world that rewards the opposite. So ask yourself honestly, what would happen if love became something we practiced, rather than something we simply talked about? What would change in your home, your friendships, your community, if love stopped being a word and started being a habit? Because the takeaway is simple and demanding at once. Love becomes powerful only when it moves from words into action. And then comes the question that towers above all the others, the one that turns the whole journey inward. What does it profit a man, Jesus asked, to gain the whole world yet forfeit his soul? Sit with the weight of that. You can gain success and still feel empty. You can accumulate wealth and never find peace. You can be celebrated by millions and remain unfulfilled in the quiet of your own heart. You can achieve everything you set out to achieve and still have no sense of why you were living at all. There is a difference between having a life and understanding why you are living it. And so here is the question that Jesus leaves hanging in the air. If you achieved everything you wanted but lost the person you were meant to become, would you truly have won? Let that settle for a moment. Do not rush past it, because it is the kind of question that quietly rearranges everything. And when you look back across all 10 of these sayings, something remarkable becomes clear. Beneath the words about enemies and judgment, forgiveness and treasure, worry and light and love, the same question keeps rising to the surface. Again and again, Jesus is not merely asking what you believe or what you know. He is asking who you are becoming. Every teaching is a mirror, and every mirror reflects the same face, the person you are slowly turning into with each choice you make. That is the thread that ties it all together. These are ancient words, spoken on hillsides and in crowded streets thousands of years ago. But their deepest challenge is not ancient at all. It belongs entirely to the life you are living right now, in this season, with the choices in front of you today. The question was never really about history. It was always about you. And here is where these words stop being something to admire and start becoming something to answer. Because the moment you truly hear them, they quietly turn toward you and wait. They ask not for agreement, but for a decision, a willingness to let something shift in how you live, how you love, and how you carry the weight of your days from this moment forward. I'm working on the conclusion now, bringing together the 10 lessons with warmth and emotion, then circling back to the original question. There's a note about including a call to action for engagement, though I need to clarify whether that should be included or held back, based on the final instructions. I see the tension now. The transition wants to close philosophically, with that question about who you'll become, not with a hard CTA. The Kongchen CTA note is specifically about the transition section itself. Since the I Ching explicitly calls for the final call to action in this outro, I'll include it after the philosophical conclusion. I'm aiming for around 4,200 characters for this final section. The pattern only becomes clear when you carry it into an ordinary day. In your relationships, it means choosing forgiveness over revenge, even when revenge feels justified. In moments of conflict, it means reaching for understanding before condemnation, listening before you decide who is wrong. In seasons of success, it means choosing purpose over endless accumulation, refusing to measure your worth by how much you gather. In suffering, it means choosing hope over despair, holding on when everything inside you wants to let go. And in the quiet corners of daily life, it means choosing kindness even when no one is watching, when there is no reward and no audience, only the truth of who you are when you think no one can see. These teachings endure for a simple reason. Human struggles endure. Technology changes with every passing year. Cultures shift, languages evolve, and whole civilizations rise and fall. Yet fear still keeps us awake at night. Anger still hardens hearts. Pride still divides us. Greed still consumes us. And loneliness still whispers that we are alone. Forgiveness is still hard. Love is still costly. And the hunger for meaning still follows us into every era we build. That is why words spoken so long ago can feel as if they were written for this exact moment in your life. So we return to the question we began with. Can 10 sayings really change your life? The honest answer is that hearing them is not enough. You can memorize every word and remain untouched. Transformation does not happen in the ear. It happens in the choices that follow. The deeper question was never whether you know what Jesus said. The question is what you are willing to change because of it. Remember the path we walked together. Love your enemies, and refuse to let hatred reshape you into its own image. Do not judge hypocritically, but examine your own heart before you weigh another's. Forgive without keeping score, releasing the weight the past has no right to carry. Treat others as you wish to be treated, and see the human being behind every face. Do not let tomorrow steal the peace of today. Become a light for others, trusting that your influence reaches farther than you know. Examine what your treasures reveal about your heart. Bring your burdens to the one who offers rest. Love others through action, not only through words, and never trade your soul for the whole world. No matter how bright the world's promises shine. These teachings were spoken centuries ago, on dusty roads and quiet hillsides, to people whose names we will never know. But their challenge has never grown old. It remains completely, unavoidably modern, and it comes down to a single question that waits for you, long after the words have faded. Who will you become when you decide to live by them? That is the question I want to leave in your hands today. So tell me, which of these 10 sayings spoke to you the most, and which one do you believe you need to apply to your life right now? Share your answer in the comments below. I read them. And there is something powerful in seeing which words find their way into different hearts. If this video gave you a new perspective on the teachings of Jesus, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss what comes next. Because sometimes the oldest words carry the very message we need to hear most today. And as this image slowly fades, let one quiet question linger with you a little longer than the rest. Which saying of Jesus will you live differently because of today?